All right, first topic here. And this generated honestly more buzz and or controversy than I thought it would on Instagram a week or two ago. But our first topic here is the selection of the Gorge Waterfalls 100K race next April as the qualifier for the Long Trail World Championships this coming September 2025 in Canfranc, which is over in the French Pyrenees. I've got a whole list of notes here. I think I have a fairly nuanced position on it. Do you want to go first, Brett? Should I go first? How do you want to handle it?
Well, the first thing that I wanted to say was I feel like there was more like pushback about Gorge Waterfalls 100K being the selection race than the Lake Sonoma 50 mile being the selection race. Like there definitely was pushback when Lake Sonoma got announced for the previous World Championships. But I feel like Gorge, people complained even more. And I would argue that Gorge is a better selection race than Lake Sonoma. Even though, well, we have to go back and look and see how people at Lake Sonoma who qualified for the team did versus the application people.
Yes.
And off the dome, I think the applications did quite a bit better than the qualifiers.
Okay.
So then in that regard, how much does it actually matter if we're going to send our best team no matter what? Because even if someone like Jim Walmsley, Zach Miller, for some reason loses to 4 people at Gorge, chances are if they get 5th and they submit their application, they're getting picked.
Yeah.
So then it's like, how much does Gorge actually matter?
Well, and also to go back to your point about the less outrage around Lake Sonoma, if I remember correctly, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, I think the reason there was less outrage then is because it was a shortened year in the sense that the Thailand World Championships had just happened, and necessarily they were operating by no choice of their own on a super short timeline, and they had to find something. So I feel like maybe the fans out there, the peanut gallery sort of gave them a temporary pass, and maybe the outrage was heightened this time around because some people would say this time around you had plenty of runway, and we don't think that you chose the most specific or close to the most specific option out there. So I'm just playing devil's advocate, but I would chalk it up to that probably.
I'm trying to remember in the like the announcement article, did they say the criteria for why they picked Gorge, or was that more behind the scenes talk that I just can't remember if
a few of
when
them
happened what? Yeah, because there was like a timeline. There was also, it was mostly, there was a time frame for which they needed the qualifier to be, and it was like before July 25 or something like that?
Before July 25. Yeah.
And also they didn't want the race to be at altitude.
And then I'm not sure if they explicitly said this, but as a new RD myself, I'm certainly sensitive to it. They likely needed a race that had a fairly liberal permit. And what I mean by that is, you look at a race like San Juan Solstice, amazing race, fits the criteria in terms of being in like June, fairly specific to Canfranc, or at least more so than Gorge, but I'm pretty sure that race is capped at 250 to 300 runners. Whereas I'm pretty sure, and again, don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure Gorge has one of the larger permitting capabilities among races that were being considered. So that goes a long way, because you don't want to interrupt the experience of people that are signing up for the race as its own end. You want to also be able to accommodate the people that are also the massive influx that's going to come in of male and female runners who want to try to qualify for the team.
Yeah, Gorge has the flexibility where they can set aside 60, 75 spots on the men's and women's sides, and it doesn't affect the masses very much. And it's also one of those courses where, I mean, you kind of have to think about the racing element too. So say 50 people on the men's and women's side do want to try and qualify for the world's team. Is it a good race course where, you can actually make moves, pass people, have, not have massive bottlenecks at aid stations? If it's crew accessible, is there lots of crew parking? Like logistically, is it fair as a qualifier race? And being, pretty accessible from a crew standpoint, and the aid stations are pretty big, and there's a live stream. Those are all, pluses in my mind that, weigh into maybe the negative of the terrain not being as hard as people want, which that was definitely the biggest thing. They're like, why would it be gorge? That's not mountain running. And well, it's hard to get in big mountains given all those other previous criteria, like permitting size, ease, accessibility, etc. I mean, you can fly into Portland. That's pretty easy as well. And then sure, you choose a really hard race here. It's still not even anywhere near hard enough to what Worlds is actually going to be.
Well, and you're a good person to ask because, again, this might require you to put your coaching hat on. But a Gorge Defender, by the way, a Gorge Defender sounds like a special edition Land Rover. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it really does.
A Gorge Defender, they might say that this race absolutely can get athletes ready for this World Champs race. Like, you can do these earlier year non-specific races to get you ready later in the summer for the mountain stuff. Do you buy that argument that like it's like that filtering process is going to work no matter what? Like, the person who wins this race, like, they can get ready, even if they weren't like labeled a mountain person heading into this, they could switch gears and find a way to be ready and competitive and kind of show up for the team in September.
I think I go back and forth with myself if we are at this point in trail running or we're not yet to this point in trail running where like there is a chance that like someone who's good at flat running could come in and poach a world spot at Gorge and then totally shit the bed
That's what I worry about
at Worlds. But the level of like talent that are lining up to these sorts of races is so high that the person who ends up winning that race, which we've seen across a lot of like, I don't know, trail careers in the last decade, the person who wins the big race can win most of the big races, like regardless of the profile or even the distance. Like you get like a Zach Miller, everyone's like, oh, Zach Miller's been crushing mountains. Like, dude won JFK. Like the dude's run some really fast 50Ks. Like Zach, who is, Mr. Mountain Man, like UTMB, Hard Rock, 40-hour weeks in the mountains, he could probably win the Gorge 100K, which is running every single step. Like if someone's going to beat Zach, chances are they could get ready for the Worlds course by, when is it, September? So that's what gives me hope is like, if this race is just simply competitive enough, even the person who maybe hasn't done a mountain race like that mountainous by Worlds will have enough time to get ready for it. They will have teammates now as a part of Team USA to help them get ready for it. Like if Jim Walmsley is my teammate and I just made the Worlds team, you bet your ass I'm going to call him up and ask him how I should best get ready for this race because we're trying to win Team Gold.
Yeah.
Like there's collective knowledge now. Yeah. So I don't think that the wrong person is going to qualify out of the Gorge.
Okay.
Does that mean every single person is going to have an amazing race who qualifies? No, that's just not how it works.
And I mean, again, to go back to Lake Sonoma, I look at the two people, at least on the men's side, that won selections there, Caleb Olson and Drew Holman. Obviously, Caleb didn't have the day that he was capable of at Innsbruck, but he actually is like a mountain first athlete. He absolutely, I think if he had prepared adequately or properly and just had his day like he's had at numerous other races in the last 2 years, he absolutely would have smashed it. Drew ended up having a great day, moving well into the top 10.
And we weren't sure if Drew was a mountain athlete because at that point he had really only proven himself at Western States.
Right.
So we were like, well, maybe it's because he's only good at this things that he was able to poach a spot at Sonoma.
Yeah.
No, if you're good enough to get a spot at Sonoma, you're good enough to be up there on the Worlds team. And like you had just said, Caleb was a mountain first guy, and then he was able to get ready for a more runnable course.
Yeah.
And got a spot there. So
yeah,
I think it's going to work.
I think those are all really good points. And I don't know, like I was both interested and shocked by the amount of pushback on social. Like you look at people like Ben Demon, reputable guy, Jason Schlarb, reputable guy, both of them, especially in this specific arena, they have a lot of pedigree, a lot of street cred, and they were like public on the announcement page being like, this is not the race. This is not going to prepare people for the demands. But I think what you're saying here is a really good point. Like we've seen people make transitions fairly seamlessly. I would just be worried about like someone who has more of like that, like Fat Ox, Desert Solstice, maybe like JFK background, who like has enough of that like proprioception and skill set to make it work at Gorge, but like totally unravels at Canfranc. Like I'm worried about again, and that's that. Like, is that scenario likely? No, but like I could see a scenario where that happens.
Yeah, and maybe that happens to one person, but how many spots are on this Long Mountain team? 8?
And there's 2 spots that you get through Gorge.
Yeah, like it's not that many.
It's not that many, right?
You're still going to get like 6 others that are,
right.
And then what's going to happen is people are going to get picked via applications, and then, one of those people is going to be very unprepared for the race because they got hurt or something or whatever, and then they didn't get a good training block, and then they have a terrible race, and everyone's like, well, why'd they let them in? It's like, there's just there's a lot of politics in this kind of sport. I mean, it's like, I guess the other question is, would you rather not have any selection races and just let it go all applications? That way people can just race and then we just pick the best team?
I actually like the total opposite scenario where it is no selection and it's all race your way in.
Like how like track and field, like US track and field for the Olympics.
Totally. I want you to have to earn it on the year. I don't want legacy to have to play a significant role. I want it to be on the day, on the year. Yeah. I like that roll of the dice.
I like the excitement of that because like I've been at the like US track and field Olympic trials, and it's more fun than the Olympics, watching people like qualify for the team. And then you have like these massive upsets and stuff. But there's so many times where we don't send the best team, because you get that person that had their day at the trials and then they don't, that's their peak. Like they don't get any better by the Olympics. And then maybe that person who clearly going to be the better runner by the Olympics, but maybe had a little injury or something leading up to it, doesn't qualify at the trials. It's like, dang, I wish I could have seen that person at the Olympics. Like I totally get both sides. The reason why I like the application process for the long trail world champs is because of how many spots there are.
Yeah.
That's why I'm okay with it. If it was only 3 spots, I wouldn't want there to be any application. I would want it to be like all racing. But because there's more than that, I kind of like there being a little leeway. I wish it was more public about who's choosing and what they are choosing for. That's the one thing that I wish would be just fully transparent, is like, these people applied and we're choosing these people.
To your point on selection, and this is top of mind because I just watched the Dream Team and the Redeem Team documentaries on Netflix around Olympic basketball. And I think there was like a 30-year stretch before 1992 where the US had this weird rule where they would only send amateur athletes to the games and they would not allow professionals to be on the teams. And as a result, the US was obviously not winning gold. They were probably most importantly politically getting like beaten by the Soviet Union and these other European teams. And then finally they were like, enough's enough. We're going totally selection. We're bringing in the pros, and it changed overnight. So I would say, caveating my position, I only want these play-in type scenarios if it's standardized globally, where like the French are doing it, the Spaniards are doing it, the Chinese are doing it, the Japanese are doing it, the Americans are doing it. If it's a level playing field in terms of criteria, I'm down. But if one country is sending their absolute best and taking no chances, and we're rolling the dice, I don't want to do that.
I feel like, if anything, the last few worlds, the big dominant trail countries have been sending their best teams, and the US has not.
Yeah.
I think each of the last like 3 world championships, the US team has gotten better. But we can look back on it and be like, oh yeah, we absolutely did not send our best team yet. I think for 2025 Worlds, we're going to get much closer to sending our best team.
Yes.
It will be really fun. Eventually, it will happen eventually when like you and I can hop on a podcast like this and be like, dude, the US is sending their best men's and women's team possible to Worlds.
Right.
I hope we get to say that for 2025.
I'm so curious to see how the UTMB field shapes out with this World Championship taking place 2-3 weeks later. It's going to be crazy to see either who rolls the dice, who picks between one or the other. Very interesting.
That segues really well into topic 3.
It does. I have a couple more things to say on this, though. Can we stay on it a little bit longer?
Yeah.
All right. Couple things. I want to say some pros because I was playing devil's advocate a little bit. The pros here to me, Gorge has a great race organization behind it. Daybreak Racing, as you know, puts on amazing events. So there's just a predictability piece in selecting Gorge.
Yeah.
They have an amazing media arm in Free Trail. Free Trail is sort of the leader in race coverage. They do an amazing job. Like you talked about the desire to have a live stream to bring in the fan experience. It's going to be amazing in that regard. And then also, like if we're pointing fingers, which I'm not going to point many because also the people that selected they're volunteers. So it's like, how much can you really like dig in? But this is not Gorge's fault either. Like I salute them. If I was an RD, like I have Twisted Fork. If Twisted Fork was in any way, shape, or form applicable to this, I would have submitted an application and, you know, taken it like a lottery scenario. Like, why not? Like, I would love the attention and the reputability and just like the deluge of pro runners descending on our course, right? Like, that's like
100%.
You'd be dumb not to submit an application. So,
yeah, from a long-term business perspective, like people are going to tune into the live stream of this race and watch the Gorge for the first time ever, and then go and sign up for it because they're like, wow, I came here for the competition to watch this race. Now I want to go run it because it turns out this course is beautiful. Yeah. And this is a sweet area of the US. And it's gonna be helpful for the long term of the Gorge. So it's like, of course they wanted to choose it.
A couple fixes though. I think that this MUT Council, they need the race to take place, or they need to. I think that this race that we're having in April of 2025 should have taken place in April of 2024, or just taken place at some point between April and September of this past year. Like, I think the French do this. They are at least a year ahead. I think that we had the window of opportunity to prepare accordingly. Mm-hmm. So I think in future years, I think that this race needs to happen way in advance. And then I also think I get the sense, and again, I did get this email from the organization saying, you know, apply. I actually think that this needs to be less an application process and more a pitching process. So for the people that are deciding this race, they need to identify the most applicable courses with permitting situations that are favorable, and they need to go on the offensive, because I think there were a lot of races out there that I think if you had worked on them in like a lobbying type way, they probably would have come around. But there's all sorts of reasons why they wouldn't go through the process of applying. Like, how many of these application invites actually went to these race directors' spams? I have no idea, you know?
Yeah, totally.
So I just want to see more time ahead. So there's opportunity for everybody. But I think. Yeah,
here's a question. I don't know if you know the answer to this or if there's even a public answer, but for those who apply to be on the Worlds team, what is like their time window of races for their application? Like they say, like, hey, look at my races dating back to blah blah blah. What's that window? Because, you know, like if you want to qualify for the like US Olympic trials in the marathon, the window to hit your qualifying mark it's like, you know, 2.5 years or 3 years or something. What's the window like for, you know, applying to 2025 Worlds? Like, it would be cool if it was something short, like June 1, 2024 to the end of 2024. And it's like, submit your results and pitch it to us why this is Worlds team worthy.
Great question. I actually don't know the answer for sure. My guess, and again, I'm going to stress this is a guess. I am guessing the most relevant results are your last 2 years of racing.
Yeah, because even then, like,
assuming if there's injuries, maybe they're looking back 3-4 years. Like if you lost a lot of a year to like an ACL injury or whatever, a stress fracture, maybe they're looking longer.
Yeah.
You know, like Adam Peterman is probably a strong contender for a selection spot, but like he had an injury for most of what was it, 23? He was out.
Yeah. But then you get to be like, he can be like, I got third at CCC.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, okay. I don't care about what you did prior to that. Another question that I don't know the answer to again, but for the application process, does a runner submit an application and then the council looks at it and says yes or no? Or do they have a whole bunch of maybes that they put into a pile? Because I'm just thinking if I were on this council, I would have a maybe pile, and then I would interview all of these athletes to hear about their races.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's the latter, because even
It's like
if
a
it's
job
not,
interview.
even if it's not that exact case, I'm sure there are scenarios where people pass on the opportunity for various reasons. Maybe they are focused on UTMB, or they did Western and they don't feel like they could run it back for effectively a double. So I feel like they have to have optionality in case people say no or injuries happen. So I'm sure there's this ongoing pile that exists.
I want to see some campaigning going on. Yeah, like I want to be able to call up Finn Melanson and be like, hey, why do you have nothing after May 2024 for a while? And you could be like, well, it's because I ran the Cocodona 250. And this translates to a 50 mile with 18,000 feet of climbing because, and I'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense then. Yeah, I want the details.
These are good questions though. Yeah, I'll have to go back and maybe,
we need to apply. We just need to go through the application process to see.
We need Leah here. Leah was on the Thailand team.
Oh yeah.
Leah would know.
Okay.
We should just text her right now.
Maybe she's listening to this episode when it comes out and we can do a follow-up.
Good questions. Anything else? So I know I ran us long, but any other questions, comments on this topic? Any parting thoughts?
Well, I guess, the last thing I wrote was just like, you said, what did you say? Quad rock? Was it kind of check the box? Quad rock. What other races come to mind that could have worked within this time window that weren't at altitude? Quad rock's at altitude.
I guess quad rock, but quad rock doesn't go above like 10,000, right? Like it's because it's springtime too. It's springtime in eastern Colorado, Fort Collins area. So that's got to be like.
But what's the average elevation of this race? Like 6,000 feet plus?
Yeah.
That's altitude.
Yeah.
The average elevation has to be like below 3,000 or 4,000 feet.
Right.
Because above that, and you do start to run into the altitude people having severe advantage. So then it's like, when you take into that account, what races are there? Lake Sonoma.
Yeah, there's honestly not that many. But again, I think my biggest gripe in this whole situation was it was another world cycle where we artificially compressed and therefore rushed the process and unnecessarily limited our options. Like we had all of 2024 to do this. We didn't have to say it has to be before July of 25, right? We didn't need to do this, but we decided to do it this way.
Even if they do need to do it and they have to do it that way, like say it has to be before July of 2025 and after January 1, 2025. So that pretty much eliminates January, February, and March. Say they do have to make it between like April, May, June of the year of Worlds. What would have been nice is if they came out with like a pre-selection post that said, these are the potential races. Like, I think there was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction as well for Gorge, because all of a sudden it just, like, we knew that the announcement was about to happen. Most people did not. And then all of a sudden it's just Gorge 100K and then a whole bunch of negative comments and people are like, oh, you're right. This is a terrible choice. I'm going to also complain in the comments. But what if 4 weeks prior there was 5 races and they said one of these races is going to be selected as a qualifier race? People can at least get primed a little bit for the decision.
Yeah.
I feel like that would have helped, right?
I think that's brilliant.
I
totally agree.
Again, transparency, a little more transparency.
At the end of the day, I mean, you and I being major super fans of the sport, we now have yet another compelling live stream to watch thanks to Gorge, thanks to probably Mountain Outpost. I'm not sure who's going to put it on. Pre-Trail's going to do a great job promoting it. Like, at the very least, you could call it a good race. It's going to be a great race. There's going to be great fields. Maybe we can call it a middle ground course where people of varying persuasions and talents kind of meet in the middle.
I think so. Like, yeah, it doesn't have a ton of vert and there's some very runnable sections, but you see a lot of blood on people at the finish lines.
Sure. Because
there's rocks and people fall. It's wet and people slip. It's not that easy.